The first thing I noticed was the wine glass. Not hers or his. A heavy-stemmed Bordeaux glass, the kind they reserve for executive dinners, even though this was a casual mixer. It was half full and already had her lipstick on the rim. His thumb was tracing the mark. Slowly. Casually. Like it belonged to him. Nobody saw me take the extra seat at table 9. Because table 9 wasn't on the seating chart. It was a leftover. A ghost table for stragglers. And I was exactly that. She didn't see me. Not yet. The room was too loud with clinking forks, industry buzzwords, and fake laughter echoing off beachfront windows. She had her back to me, her shoulders bare under a silky teal dress she never wears around me, apparently reserved for team-building events. I knew that dress. Just not like this. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Not according to her. The retreat was invite-only, hand-picked for key players and growth strategy, and according to her, it was small, strict, no spouses, no overlap. Which is hilarious, since her company's been strategically acquired by the same corporation I work for. They sent me an invite 48 hours ago. I didn't RSVP. I just packed. So now here I was, 3 seats away from my own wife, at a company event she explicitly told me I wasn't relevant enough to attend. She looked relaxed. Like, deeply relaxed. The way she never looks when she's around me anymore. Her laugh didn't have that strained, polite note I've grown used to hearing at home. It was full, carefree, unedited. And the guy sitting beside her? He wasn't laughing. He was listening. Leaning in like her voice was the only thing keeping his glass from shattering. She touched his wrist when he made a joke. She lingered. I hadn't moved. I couldn't. My name tag was still in my hand, the lanyard tangled between my fingers. Someone tried to hand me a seafood appetizer, and I think I mumbled something about allergies just to make them go away. Then her guy, slid a room key across the table. Just once. Clean. Smooth. No words. Just a glance. She picked it up without hesitation. Without guilt. Without thinking. And then she stood. Not to leave, not yet, but to adjust her dress. She ran her hands down her waist like she was smoothing herself out for the night ahead. She wasn't looking for me. Why would she? According to her, I wasn't even on this continent. But I was. At table 9. With a front row seat to whatever came next. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't interrupt. I just watched her walk away with him, holding the key. And I stayed seated. At the table that didn't exist. I didn't go after them right away. It would have been too easy to storm across the resort floor, yell her name, and create the kind of public scene that ends up on someone's phone and lives forever on the internet. I'm not built like that. I'm not the guy with confrontational instincts or cinematic timing. I'm the guy who chokes on his words and spirals in private. So instead, I waited. Waited until they were out of view. Waited until I could breathe again. Waited until my hand stopped shaking enough to set down the untouched appetizer I never wanted in the first place. Then I got up, walked calmly, maybe even a bit too slowly, through the wide lobby, past the indoor palm trees and curated scent diffusers, and approached the front desk like a man asking for towels. The woman behind the desk was young, overly cheerful, probably thought I was there to surprise a coworker or plan something romantic. I gave her Jason's name. I didn't know his last name, but I remembered the bold initials on his lanyard, JH, and I added a few fake HR details about his schedule misprint, for good measure. I'm not proud of how easily it came to me. But grief makes liars of all of us, I guess. She didn't even ask questions. Just tapped the keyboard, smiled, and told me, Mr. H is in room 408. So I walked down the hallway. Slowly. Counting every pattern tile on the carpet. The air got cooler the closer I got to the elevators. Or maybe it was just the dread climbing up from my gut. The button dinged. The doors opened. I stepped in. The ride to the 4th floor felt like an hour. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked unfamiliar. Pale. Hollow-eyed. I wondered what she'd say if she saw me like this. Would she even flinch? When the door slid open, I didn't head to room 408 right away. I stopped 3 doors down at a housekeeping cart. There, sitting on top of a pile of fresh towels, was a single white envelope labeled for '08, guest experience credit. Inside was a voucher for the rooftop spa and bar for 2. I took it. Maybe out of spite. Maybe because I wanted to know just how far this lie went. I waited across the hall, behind the corner near the ice machine, until I saw them. They came giggling down the hallway, shoes in hand, like teenagers who'd snuck away from their parents. Her hair was messier than before, her lipstick slightly smudged. He kissed her neck before sliding the card into the door. She looked around, not for me, not for anyone, just to make sure they weren't being watched by anyone from work. Except I was there. And she didn't see me. She went into the room first. He followed, pulling the door shut behind him with a soft click. I waited. I waited for 10 minutes, maybe more. Enough time for shame to catch up with adrenaline. Then I did something stupid. I walked back to the front desk, asked if I could leave a personalized note for room 408. They handed me a notepad and smiled like I was the sweetest man in the world. Enjoy the view. You're not alone. Table 9. I handed it off, asked that it be slid under the door in 30 minutes, and returned to my room. Alone. The irony of it all? She still hadn't texted me. Not a single check-in. Not a good night. I wondered if she even realized what day it was. It was our wedding anniversary. 10 years ago to the day, we danced barefoot in a backyard to a scratched-up CD player and promised each other forever. And tonight, she forgot I existed. But I was done being invisible. The morning came with a sharp knock on my door, and the dull ache of regret still lodged behind my eyes. I hadn't slept. Just lay there, on top of the covers, fully dressed, playing the night over and over in my head until I convinced myself I'd imagined parts of it. Maybe the note I left hadn't even been delivered. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe I was losing my mind. I opened the door to find a thin envelope on the floor. Not white like mine. This one was black, with gold trim. I recognized the font immediately. Company issued. Inside was an itinerary for the day, a joint department seminar by the pool at 10 a.m., followed by brunch, and an optional leadership exercise on the beach. Mandatory attendance was highlighted in red. Perfect. I needed to see her again, needed to see them both. To confirm this wasn't some hallucination conjured by years of neglect and misplaced trust. So I showered, put on my company shirt, and headed down, blending in with a sea of name tags and strained smiles. The pool area had been transformed into an outdoor conference space. Rows of lounge chairs had been turned toward a white pop-up screen. Waitstaff were already weaving through the crowd with trays of coffee, tiny croissants, and bowls of fruit I was too nauseous to eat. And then she arrived. She wore sunglasses this time. A crisp blazer over that same silky dress from the night before, as if trying to disguise it. But I knew. Her walk had changed. Her smile had changed. She looked more confident, more radiant than I'd seen her in months. Like she was finally starring in her own show, and the audience actually applauded. Jason followed 2 steps behind. He wasn't touching her, but he didn't need to. There was a familiarity in how he moved beside her, like they'd already broken every rule and now were just pretending to care about the illusion. She didn't see me right away. She was too busy mingling, shaking hands, laughing, but not with me. Not like before. And when she finally did catch sight of me across the rows of seating, her reaction was subtle, too subtle. No wide eyes. No surprise. Just a slight pause, like she was calculating something in her head. Like she wasn't sure how much I'd seen. She waved. Not lovingly. Not excitedly. Just waved. Like I was a coworker she'd forgotten worked here. I waved back. Inside, my chest felt like someone had lit a fuse. The presentation began. Some VP talking about integration between departments, shared goals, communication synergy. It all sounded like filler, like white noise. But then something caught my attention. They were handing out group assignments. Mixed table brainstorms. Each group had to pitch a hypothetical project using both teams' strengths. And by some cursed twist of fate, or maybe someone in HR really did have a cruel sense of humor, I got placed at her table. She sat directly across from me. Jason beside her. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then she gave me a polite smile, her sunglasses still on, and said, "Morning." I didn't respond. My throat was dry. The group got to work discussing metrics and customer touchpoints. I pretended to listen. Every so often, I glanced at her hand, resting lightly on Jason's knee under the table, shielded by the white cloth. She didn't move it. She didn't care. And Jason? He barely looked at me. Either he didn't recognize me from last night's shadowy hallway, or he didn't think I was worth acknowledging. Both possibilities burned equally. I sat there, nodding along to their ideas, drawing circles on my notepad and wondering what kind of man I had become. I wasn't furious. I wasn't exploding. I was dissolving. Quietly. Like sugar in lukewarm tea. When the session ended, people scattered toward the brunch tables. I stayed behind. Let them all leave. But before she walked off with him, she turned back for a second and said something so hauntingly casual I'll never forget it. "Hey, let's catch up later." You seem quiet. Quiet. I watched her walk away, Jason's hand now grazing the small of her back, and I realized something that chilled me more than betrayal ever could. She wasn't scared of being caught. She was confident I'd do nothing, and that made her right. I spent most of the afternoon pretending to check emails from a lounge chair that didn't even face the ocean. The heat pressed down like punishment, but I stayed anyway, hoping the stillness would drown out the noise in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment at the table. The way her fingers rested on Jason's knee like it was natural. Like it had always been that way. Like I wasn't even real. There were moments I almost convinced myself to pack my bag and leave. Just disappear, check out early, call it work burnout, and fly home before the last flight out. But every time I stood up, something in me stayed stuck. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was pain. Or maybe it was the sick part of me that needed to know how far she'd fallen. Or worse, how far she'd always been falling without me noticing. It was just past 6 when I finally moved. The resort had started shifting toward its night rhythm. Soft jazz playing near the cabanas, lanterns flickering in glass cases, and guests swapping name tags for wine glasses. I wandered the paths between the buildings like I was looking for something. A view, a moment, a reason not to feel so pathetic. And that's when I saw her again. She was near the fire pit, barefoot now, curled into a wicker chair beside Jason, whispering into his ear like they were already in their own world. Her heels were dangling from her fingers, her expression a blend of exhaustion and satisfaction. And for the first time, I realized something deeper than anger. She looked like she didn't miss me at all. I couldn't watch them any longer. I turned and walked the opposite direction. Not toward my room, not toward the bar. I didn't know where I was going until I stopped in front of their door. Room 408. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe 20 minutes. The hallway was empty. My thoughts weren't. My plan, if there was one, was simple. Leave the voucher I'd taken from their door earlier, the romantic rooftop experience, with a note. Something passive-aggressive. Something sad. Something I'd regret in the morning. But before I could slide it under the door, I heard her voice. Inside. Muffled through the wood, but clear enough to recognize. She was laughing. Again. That same laugh I hadn't heard in months. Light, careless, unburdened. And then silence. I didn't realize I'd pressed my ear to the door until it creaked slightly. Not open, but just enough that I panicked and pulled away. I backed up against the opposite wall, heart pounding, mouth dry. And that's when I heard it. Not a word, not even a sentence. Just one sound that shredded me in half. It was her saying his name. Not Jason. Something softer. Shortened. Familiar. Jace. It was how she used to say my name, when we were still close enough that everything had a nickname. When our world was small enough that no one else had a version of her like I did. Now someone else did. I should have left. I should have walked away, kept my dignity, whatever was left of it. But instead, I did something worse. I went back to the front desk and asked for a replacement key. I told them I'd lost mine. And because this place had no sense of security, they handed one over without question. Not to my room. To theirs. I didn't go back immediately. I held it in my hand for nearly an hour, sitting by the edge of the beach where the sand met stone, staring at that little card like it held some kind of moral compass I'd long abandoned. I knew what I could do. I could walk in. I could catch them in the act. I could blow it all up. But I didn't want to see it. Not really. I just wanted her to explain. To admit it. To see me again. So I stood up, brushed the sand from my legs, and headed back to the resort. Room 408. The key slid in. The lock clicked. And I pushed the door open, slowly, breath caught halfway up my throat. But what I found inside wasn't what I expected. Not at all. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp near the far bed. The curtains had been drawn tight, trapping the last of the daylight somewhere outside, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and something else, something expensive and unfamiliar. I stepped in slowly, heart pounding like it was trying to warn me. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe laughter, maybe movement, maybe the unmistakable sound of betrayal in progress, but the room was silent. Still, almost too quiet, like it had just exhaled. There were 2 glasses on the nightstand, each half empty. A pair of sandals rested beside the dresser. Her earrings lay neatly in a porcelain dish. And on the far bed, the one by the window, her purse was open, unzipped, vulnerable. I didn't mean to walk toward it. I didn't mean to do anything. But my body moved before my conscience could stop it. I wasn't there to invade. I told myself that. I wasn't a monster. I was just desperate. For understanding. For explanation. For something. Anything that would make this feel less like a waking nightmare and more like a terrible misunderstanding. And then I saw the photo. It was tucked beneath a copy of the resort's amenities brochure, just barely visible under the flap of her purse. A simple, printed 4x6, no frame, no caption. But it stopped me cold. It was her and Jason. Together. Not from this weekend. From before. Before the retreat. Before the tan lines. Before the new dress. She was sitting on a rooftop, leaning into him, both of them holding cocktails and laughing at something outside the frame. Her head rested against his shoulder. His hand was on her thigh. They looked like a couple. A real one. Not a fling, not a flirtation, not some silly corporate tension, a couple. And worse than that? I was in the background. Out of focus. Blurred. Sitting at a different table, completely unaware. Probably checking my phone or reading a menu. Oblivious. Invisible. I sat down hard on the corner of the bed, clutching the photo like it might burn a hole in my hand. All this time, I thought maybe something happened here. At the resort. A mistake. An impulse. But this wasn't new. It had been going on long before this trip. And she brought the photo with her. Why? To feel safe? To remember? To celebrate? I didn't hear the door until it opened behind me. The soft click. The shuffle of footsteps. I turned too slowly. My heart had already fallen through the floor. She froze in the doorway, sandals in one hand, a cardigan in the other. Our eyes met. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I didn't know you were, she started, but her voice cracked. I didn't stand. I didn't yell. I didn't even move. I just held up the photo. It trembled in my hand more than I wanted it to. She looked at it, and she didn't flinch. Didn't deny it. Didn't cry. She just sighed. Like she'd been carrying a heavy bag and finally dropped it. Curtis, she said quietly, I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. How long? I asked. I didn't recognize my voice. It sounded distant, like someone else asking the question I was too broken to form properly. She looked down at her shoes. Then back at me. 6 months. That was longer than I thought. Longer than I could comprehend. Half a year. Dozens of dinners. Mornings. Texts. Good nights. 1,000 moments where she looked me in the eye and lied without blinking. I didn't plan it, she said. It just happened. We started talking after that San Diego trip. He was easy. He listened. You were always tired. Always distracted. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the irony. I'd been exhausted trying to build a future for us while she was dismantling it behind my back. So this trip, I said. It wasn't about work. She shook her head. It started as work. But we wanted time. Together. Without pretending. That hurt more than I expected. Not the betrayal itself, but the fact that she'd wanted it to be real. That she saw him as more than a mistake. Why not tell me before? I asked. Why not end it like a decent person instead of hiding behind a spreadsheet and a fake itinerary? She walked further into the room now, slowly, as if approaching an injured animal. Because I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I stared at her, and something inside me went cold. You didn't want to hurt me, I repeated. So you let me book a flight. Show up to a retreat you said I couldn't attend. Sit across from you while you played house with someone else. That's how you protected me. She looked like she wanted to cry now, but I knew better. Those tears weren't guilt. They were inconvenience. I never wanted you to see it, she whispered. Not like this. But this is what it is, isn't it? I said. This is the real you. And in that moment, with all the pieces in front of me, I realized something darker than rage. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just Jason. She had stopped loving me long before she ever touched him. She stood there waiting for me to say something, anything. A scream. A sob. Even silence would have been easier to stomach than the strange, shaky chuckle that escaped my throat. It wasn't funny. Not at all. But sometimes when your heart breaks in just the right way, your body betrays you before your mind catches up. She flinched at the sound like I'd slapped her. Maybe she expected me to storm out. Maybe she expected some dramatic exit, a slammed door, or one of those quiet movie moments where the wounded man walks away without looking back. But I didn't move. I stayed there, sitting on the edge of the bed she'd probably shared with him just hours earlier. The same bed where her perfume still lingered like a ghost of the woman I thought I married. She reached out to me, not to touch, just to gesture, as if words weren't enough. Curtis, please. I know this is, but I held up my hand, and she stopped mid-sentence. Don't, I said. Don't ask me to make this easier for you. And then, like a switch had flipped inside her, her tone shifted. She took a small step back, and her voice dropped into something more composed. Controlled. I just think we should handle this carefully. For both of us. No drama. No public fallout. We're both professionals. Let's be smart about this. Smart. That's what she wanted now, strategy. A betrayal she'd engineered like a spreadsheet and wanted to manage like a PR crisis. I nodded slowly. Pretended to agree. She visibly relaxed. I need your word, she said gently. That you won't tell anyone. Not your team. Not mine. Not HR. This could impact everything, for both of us. Can you promise me that? I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I no longer recognized. This wasn't the woman who cried during animated movies or danced in the kitchen barefoot. This was someone who had moved on without informing me. Someone who'd taken a piece of my life and repurposed it for herself without remorse. I promise, I said softly. Her shoulders dropped in relief. She smiled. A small, grateful smile, and picked up her cardigan off the chair like that was it. Like we'd made a deal, and now we'd both carry on. But she didn't know what I'd already done. See, while I sat outside this room earlier, before she arrived, I texted myself the photo from her purse. Took a quick picture of the picture, front and back. On the back, there was a message written in her handwriting. San Diego, our first real weekend. Yours always. Kay. I didn't know what I was going to do with it at the time. I didn't have a plan. But the moment she asked for silence, something in me snapped. Not vengeance. Not spite. Something quieter. Sadder. I wanted the truth to breathe. So that evening, I didn't tell anyone, not with words. I just uploaded the image to the company-wide event album. The one that was open for staff to contribute photos from the retreat. Beach pics, dinner selfies, group shots, and now this. Her and Jason. Together. With my blurred face in the background. I didn't include a caption. I didn't need to. By morning, the album would be reviewed by the executive comms team before going live to everyone attending the merger summit. They wouldn't say anything outright, professionalism and discretion and all that, but whispers would start. Questions would form. And in a company obsessed with image, with optics, with how things look, this one photo would be the equivalent of a whisper turned scream. That was all I needed. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Just acknowledgement. A crack in the mask she'd so carefully worn. And when she walked out of that room, cardigan on, confident, clueless, she didn't know what was coming. She thought she'd won. But I had finally done something she never expected from me. I'd stopped protecting her. I didn't sleep that night, but it wasn't the same kind of restlessness I'd felt before. This time, it wasn't confusion or sadness that kept me awake. It was clarity. Cold, precise clarity. The kind that comes after a long fever breaks, and everything suddenly looks sharper, cleaner, more honest than before. Around 3 a.m., I walked the length of the beach twice, my shoes in hand, waves crashing at my ankles. I stared at the stars and thought about how easily we mistake longevity for love. Just because something lasts doesn't mean it's worth keeping. Sometimes the only thing endurance proves is that you were willing to be ignored for longer than you should have been. By 6 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and sitting on the deck outside the resort cafe. I didn't want breakfast, but I ordered something just to have an excuse to sit. Coffee. A fruit plate. I couldn't taste any of it. My eyes were fixed on my phone. Waiting. Watching. And then it happened. At 6:43, the first ping. Someone had opened the retreat photo album. By 7:10, for more pings. All from people I recognized. One of them a director in her department. Another from mine. And then, at 7:17, the first message popped up in the event-wide Slack group. Is that who I think it is in picture number 46? No names. No accusations. Just a fuse lit with a single spark. The responses came quickly. Wait, is that her? I thought she was married. Isn't that guy one of the vendor reps? I watched it all unfold in real time. Dozens of eyes slowly noticing what they weren't supposed to see. That one photo, nestled among team-building selfies and awkward group yoga poses, suddenly louder than any announcement. Then came the direct messages. Private, cautious, full of half-formed sentences and screenshots. And finally, the inevitable. A call from HR. They asked if I was available for a quick clarification meeting. Not in person. Discreet. Off the record. Just a quick check-in to make sure everything was appropriate during the retreat. I didn't lie. But I didn't throw her under the bus either. I told them the truth carefully. Yes, we were married. Yes, I attended the event. No, I hadn't been told she would be there with someone. Yes, I was aware of a photo that might cause misinterpretation, but I couldn't control what people chose to post. They thanked me, said they'd review internally. That was all. No explosions. No drama. Just the quiet kind of storm that builds without thunder, the kind that changes the entire landscape without a single lightning strike. By the time I walked into the brunch area, I could already feel it. The shift. People looking at her, then at me. Conversations that stopped when I got close. Polite nods replaced by tight smiles and nervous glances. She arrived 5 minutes later, blissfully unaware. Wearing white, of all things. Laughing with Jason, still, like the world hadn't cracked open beneath their feet. But she knew the moment she stepped into the room. The way conversations dropped. The way eyes followed her just a beat too long. She spotted me, alone at a table in the back, and her entire posture changed. Her smile faltered. Her steps slowed. And for a moment, I swear she almost turned back. But she didn't. She walked straight toward me, jaw clenched, a forced smile on her lips. She leaned down, close, and hissed through her teeth like a snake trying not to be heard. What did you do? I didn't respond. I just sipped my coffee and looked at her like I was seeing her for the very first time. She stood there, furious and exposed, and all I felt was a strange, bittersweet calm. I trusted you, she whispered. I looked up at her then, blinking slowly. No, I said. You trusted me to stay silent. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. And I realized in that moment that this wasn't just the collapse of our marriage. It was the collapse of the version of me she thought she controlled. The version that stayed quiet. That stepped aside. That let her shape the narrative. That version was gone. Jason tried to approach me later, all corporate speak and clenched teeth, asking if we could talk man to man. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I just looked at him, smiled faintly, and said, I thank you, and my wife already did plenty of talking. He didn't bother me again. By evening, the photo had been quietly removed. No public statement. No fallout, not yet. But the damage was done. The illusion had fractured. And I wasn't done. Because there was still one last thing she didn't know I'd seen. Something that would change everything. She packed that night. Not in a hurry. Not in shame. But in that same clinical, practical way she used to pack for business trips. Deliberate, precise, emotionless. I watched from the balcony of my new room. I'd asked the front desk to move me to a suite with an ocean view. They obliged, probably assuming I was a director. I didn't correct them. The wind was soft, the sky violet with the last threads of sunset, and all I could think about was how strange it felt to be breathing fully again. Like the air had been trapped in my chest for months and was finally moving through me freely. She didn't say goodbye when she left. She didn't knock. She didn't call. Just rolled her suitcase down the stone path and disappeared into a waiting car like this had all been a minor inconvenience in her storyline. But I stayed. Not because I was clinging to anything. No. I stayed because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for her to return to me. I was already returning to myself. The morning after she left, the final seminar began. I almost skipped it, but something pulled me there. Closure, maybe. Or curiosity. I sat near the back as the keynote speaker took the mic, a woman I hadn't noticed before, someone from an adjacent team who'd been quietly observing throughout the retreat. She talked about resilience. Not the corporate kind. The real kind. The kind you find when someone tears the floor out from beneath you and you still find a way to stand. She talked about not being the loudest voice in the room, but the one who doesn't leave when things get uncomfortable. The kind who survives quietly, patiently, and then builds something better. It hit harder than I expected. After the talk, I stayed behind. A few people came up to me, not to gossip, not to pry, but to simply see me. To tell me they'd noticed, they'd understood, and if I ever needed a role in their department, I'd be welcomed. One guy from data analytics even said, honestly, the way you handled it? I've never seen someone carry themselves like that. Total class. Class. That word used to sound like an empty label. But in that moment, it felt like something I'd earned. Before leaving the resort, I took one last walk along the beach. Alone. No ring on my finger. No confusion in my chest. And that's when I saw it, a small, hand-painted sign stuck in the sand near the waterline. Just a scrap of driftwood with blue letters. Not every ending is a failure. Some are freedom. I don't know who wrote it. Maybe someone like me. But I smiled. A full, real smile. Back home, I filed for divorce. Quietly. Respectfully. No lawyers with knives out. No emails filled with venom. Just a clean line drawn where the damage stopped and the healing began. I changed jobs 2 months later, not to escape, but to grow. Different team. Better hours. A boss who saw what I could do, not just how quiet I was. And one morning, while getting coffee at a new corner cafe, I met someone. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't dramatic. She just noticed I ordered the same thing every Tuesday and asked if I'd ever tried the scones. I hadn't. We sat together. We laughed. And I told her slowly, cautiously, about a time in my life when I forgot how to take up space. She said, "Well, lucky for you, there's room at my table." Her name's Elise. And for the first time in years, I don't feel invisible anymore. I feel seen.